Alright team, how's things? Thank you for joining us, thank you for your time. 3 o'clock in the morning as I do this, our latest breakdown, as we take a look at what happened on Saturday night at Resorts World Arena when Shabazz Masood went into enemy territory for a matchroom fighter as he went into Queensberry ground and scored a victory over Liam Davies to win Davis's IBO World Championship. I scored the fight 117-112 to Masood. That's 8 rounds to 3 with 1 even. Couldn't split them in the 5th. Masood, of course, worked very well off the back foot and exposed some of Liam Davis's frailties. I thought Davis fell in love with his power in lieu of his recent performances, and that came back to bite him on the night. But I think even if Liam was at his very best, I think he would have come up short against the sharp shooting skills of Masood. But the things I wanted to touch on weren't really related to what actually happened in between the ropes. It's what's going to happen going forward for the loser, and also one of the vagaries of boxing scoring over the past 20 odd years, which we will get into shortly. But first of all, we'll go on to what I think will be a difficult path ahead for Liam, when you consider that just around about a year ago he was one of Frank Warren's favourite side projects. If you can recall, Liam's rise to prominence came first of all through his upset victory at the time over Mark Leach for the British title. And Liam was if you remember when Liam Davies was around, he was one of those fighters who, when Frank was on his arse, as it were, a few years back, nowhere near the amount of purchase and skin in the game that he has currently, thanks of course to Turki Al Sheikh basically signing a check and saying, this is what I'm having your stable and doing what I want with it for this amount of money. And Frank of course said, yep, of course, no worries. And when that happened, that turned out to be something of a misnomer for a lot of the Frank Warren stable. As if you listen to my last podcast, you would have heard that my reason, for the very same reasons which have affected Liam Davies, have also affected Anthony Yard. At a time when Frank was just looking for people to fill up his shows, fill up dates, Liam Davies was ideal. Didn't cost a lot of money, shifted a few tickets, and he was a means to an end. But of course Liam wasn't to know that. Liam kept on doing what he was doing, kept on winning, kept on getting the victories. Frank essentially, in my view, this isn't just in my view, Frank has glazed him, said we'll give you a Nui, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. But I don't think he had any intention of doing that at all. There was a time, say, was it a year or 18 months ago, when it very much looked as if Frank was keeping Liam in-house and was veering him towards a showdown with Dennis McCann. But then sometime within that time frame, it was decided, almost off-screen as it were, that Liam wasn't going to be fighting Dennis McCann. They were going to put them on separate paths. As we saw last time out, in his last IBO Championship defence, excuse me, that was a victory. Not only was it a good victory, it was a victory in unexpected circumstances. I don't think anybody expected Liam to get it over and out in the first round, and that victory in itself almost made us gassed us all up in a sense, making us think that maybe Liam was a little bit better than what he was. And it was something of a surprise when it was announced that Liam Davies' next fight was going to be against Shabazz Masood, who almost is a member of the Who Needs Him club. Masood, who has been on Matchroom's books for a little while now, didn't get as much traction for his victory over Jack Bateson. He was majestic in that performance, considering that Bateson was a quality amateur Team GB member and was also being tipped for big things as a pro, and Masood really took him down rather elegantly and scored a rather impressive finish. And since then, as I said, it hasn't really moved, things haven't really moved in the way they should have done for Masood. And as I said, I was surprised that Davies and Masood was happening, especially when you take into consideration also that Masood has those 2 victories over Davies as an amateur. So maybe Davies was a bit too focused on getting revenge rather than forging his own career path. And now, with the victory, now with the defeat, excuse me, the manner of the defeat, it was quite comprehensive. I think if they were to fight again, there's not many calls for a rematch, but if they were, I think the fight would still go the same way. And I think now maybe it might have hit Liam that perhaps what Frank was promising him was never going to happen. And now that Frank essentially doesn't need Liam as much as he did do, as we all saw last night, that show was pretty much a functional show. It was just filling out the terms of a contract. It's been pretty clear for the past few months, to my eyes anyway, that Frank is leaving TNT, as it was officially announced today that he's joining DAZN, one of the worst kept secrets in the sport. And this was just, as I said, this was just simply servicing a contract show on Saturday night, and this was a reason. And that main event, again, if Turkey Al Sheikh didn't have his hands in both Frank and Eddie's pockets, there's no way that fight was happening between a Matchroom fighter and a Queensberry fighter. With the amount of good feeling between the two camps, Frank Warren and Frank Smith were next to each other all night long, agreeing with each other, it seemed. If this fight had happened because it was being mandated, for example, by the board, and both camps were confident in their man winning, and Turkey Al Sheikh was not involved, it would have been a completely different atmosphere, a different type of promotion, and even with a British title on the line rather than an IBO, I think the fight would have had more purchase, more meaning, and everything behind it would have been totally different to what it is now. After what we saw last night, it's almost as if they've all moved on and that's it. Oh, good old show, shake hands, see you next time. It's quite disappointing in a way. But I suppose you could, another way of looking at it is to say that the fight probably wouldn't have even happened in the first place. Both camps would have argued, we want it on our show, we want it on our show. So I suppose we should be grateful that we did see the fight. But, as I was saying, I think Masood, this is more of a damaging, any loss is a damaging loss, but this loss is going to have more ramifications for Liam Davies, and I don't think Masood will get as much props for winning. I don't think this is going to move him along the line as much as it would have done if Davies would have won. So it's a really damaging loss for Davies. Fingers crossed that Masood can move on to bigger and greater things, but I just think his style and the way he boxes, and he's not really a marketable boxer, as it were. He is an excellent fighter, of course, but I think it's going to be struggle for his opportunities for him to get, rather than it would be Davies. But another thing I've just remembered I want to touch on was the fact that it was a Frank Warren show, Queensberry promotion. Davies was the home fighter, and yet Masood seemed to have the majority of the away support. It was a bit of a topsy-turvy situation, but it did make for a great atmosphere. The other thing I wanted to chat about was the scorecards. Not just the closeness of the scorecards, but one of the peculiarities of boxing. And that's, if you ever get, and this is a prime example of what we saw last night, you get two fighters, one who's with A promoter, one is with promoter B, two rivals. The fight happens, it goes the distance. Just like last night, it was pretty clear, we all saw who won that fight. But as it always seems to happen in these particular cases, when the host promoter's fighter is lost, it wouldn't even matter if Davies would have lost every single round of that fight and barely would have landed a punch. At the end of those 12 rounds, one of those three judges would have scored the fight to Liam Davies. It is a boxing oddity that just throws itself up so often that it simply cannot be coincidence. The reasons for doing it, of course, are reasonably minimal. It doesn't. Why anybody who doesn't agree with this viewpoint will be out there saying, "Well, why would a promoter be so?" excuse me, would be so hell bent on making sure that one judge scores it his way. Well, of course, if you've got one judge in the can, then of course all you need is one of the other two, and you've got the fight. And the second reason, and this is a long-term vision reason, if you like, I think it's a case of in future time, if ever that fighter is being looked at for an opponent, as an opponent in a future fight for another fighter, when they're looking down their box rec, they will look down and see, oh, they only lost by split decision or majority decision, rather than it being a unanimous decision. A unanimous decision loss, say 118, 110. I'll tell you another example of this, which I'm now about to, I just thought of this right now, off the top of my head, was Kubrat Pulev versus Derek Chisora 1. Pulev won that fight going away. He won that easily, 118, 110 all day. And yet one of the three judges had that fight even. and that fight was a Sauerland event promotion, who of course at the time were promoting Chisora. This happens all the time. I can remember another instance. I think it was Vicente Escobedo versus Michael Katsidis, and that was a 9-3, 10-2 in rounds fight all the way, 118, 110, and one of the judges in that one scored it even. It just seems it's very peculiar that it's always the host promoter who gets one of the scorecards in his favour. Keep an eye out for it. It's one of those things. Unanimous decisions that the away fighter should get. It always seems to be a split or a majority. There you go, I've said it. Keep an eye out for it. Well, that's about it from me, I think, for today. That's 10.5 minutes. I can't think of anything else that I'm desperate to say, other than, I've got to say, I just remembered, the undercard of the Frank show had a small hall classic which wasn't taking place in a small hall. If you missed it, try and check out Echo Esserman's fight with Ben Vaughan. It was a 10-round cracker. If anybody would have seen the press conference beforehand, and if you had no knowledge of Ben Vaughan, you would have had Echo Esserman down for an easy victory. But no way, no how. Great performance, a great fight. Well done to both. Hobson Conche-Shao, I thought, was very unlucky to lose his WBC Super Featherweight Championship to Oshaki Foster in the rematch. But then again, of course, Foster was pretty much robbed in the first. And Floyd Schofield just about hung on for victory on Golden Boy Promotions' C show, dressed up as a B show. And he scored a points victory over Rene Tiron, I think was the gentleman's name. A hard fight it was. Both fighters were down. And it was another exciting fight if you need to check that out. Anyway, that is it from me now. That's me been rambling on for 12 minutes. Thank you very much for listening. If you made it this far, as I always say, thank you very much. If you have, you deserve a medal if I had one to give you. Until next time, thank you very much. And as always, keep your gloves up and your chin down. This is LVD Sport, out for the count.